This is East Asia Tonight.
Good evening, I'm Telly Edwards. Tonight's top stories from East Asia. Hong Kong has charged 7 people and 2 firms over last year's deadly Tai Po fire. The first charges linked to the disaster that killed 168 people include manslaughter and money laundering. Now, Malaysian Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim is in Tokyo to deepen ties with Japan. Alongside a new currency swap agreement, the biggest breakthrough came on the energy front, with the nations sealing a major deal. Also, South Korea's President Myung is in Brussels to strengthen relations with the European Union. Security and economic cooperation top the agenda as he begins a 10-day tour of the region. And labor strife in South Korea. More than half the workforce of internet company Kakao threaten a walkout over employment conditions, including profit sharing. China's tech giants are going global, building more data centers and pushing deeper into AI. But bigger ambitions bring sharper scrutiny as Beijing tightens oversight in the name of national security. Now, Hong Kong's deadliest fire in decades enters the legal spotlight with criminal charges filed. 7 people and 2 companies have been charged over the Tai Po blaze that killed 168 residents last November. And this marks the first time charges are being laid over the disaster. Authorities say a total of 25 offences have been filed following investigations and legal advice from the Department of Justice. The list of allegations includes manslaughter, conspiracy to defraud, money laundering, attempting to pervert the course of public justice, and tax evasion. Those charged include individuals who held roles in the estate's major renovation project. The 2 companies charged are the consultancy and the main contractor involved in the works. The cases were heard at court today. Now, the fire tore through 7 of the complex's 8 residential towers, leaving thousands displaced. The South Korean President Myung is in Brussels, his first visit to Europe since taking office, and the first trip by a South Korean leader to the Belgian capital in 8 years. Now, Mr. Yi held talks with Prime Minister Bart de Wever and the Foreign Minister today, ahead of a meeting with European Commissioner President Ursula von der Leyen and European Council President Antonio Costa. Trade and economic cooperation are high on the agenda. Now, Brussels is the first stop on Mr. Yi's 10-day trip to Europe, which will also take him to Italy before the Group of 7 summit in France. Now, William Denslow has been tracking developments for CNA, and he joins us live from Brussels. William, so what is on the agenda at the upcoming 11th EU Republic of Korea summit?
Well, Telly, this is all about advancing the strategic partnership between the 2 sides. Now, a free trade agreement was brokered between the EU and South Korea back in 2011. Since then, the trade in goods has increased more than 5%. This summit is an opportunity to expand that trade relationship, especially in the digital age. We are understanding this digital agreement will really help facilitate the easier flow of e-commerce, data, really eliminating some barriers when it comes to the digital space. Also, critically on the agenda, will be addressing issues including AI cooperation, critical raw materials, of course, so keenly needed here in Europe amid these geopolitical tensions we're seeing with the likes of the US and China. Also, competitiveness. We can expect the issue of European proposed steel quotas to be a key area of discussion. We've heard from South Korea's trade minister calling for more favourable terms in that respect. Another key component of this summit, security and defence partnership. That was brokered in 2024. We can expect more inroads in deepening that cooperation in this space even further.
Also, Will, let's talk about President Yi's visit at this point in time. Just how significant is it?
Sally, you mentioned it's going to be a busy week and a half or so for the president, a number of stops across Europe. And this comes at an incredibly strategic time. This comes with the G7 just around the corner, as you rightly mentioned, and we can expect China to be a major topic of those discussions, with the EU seeking to further de-risk rather than decouple from Beijing, and to address what they describe as major trade imbalances, and are looking to deepen trading relations with partners like South Korea. So this will be expected to be prominent at this summit here in Brussels and across European capitals, as well as in the French town of Evian next week. This also comes at a time, of course, this week where President Xi Jinping has been in North Korea. So that timing very significant indeed. We understand that at this summit here in Brussels, that issue of nuclear non-proliferation will be another key topic of discussion. And here in Europe, a huge topic is support for Ukraine. European Union has been very vocal in praise for Seoul's position when it comes to support for Ukraine. They're very much hoping that that partnership, that cooperation continues further.
Many thanks for that update, William Denslow, covering EU-South Korea relations for CNA live from Brussels. Now, in other news, a criminal court in Thailand is set to deliver its verdict tomorrow against two men accused of carrying out a bomb attack at a popular shrine in central Bangkok nearly 11 years ago. Now, that case has drawn attention across the region, partly because of questions over whether the bombing was linked to Thailand's deportation of Uyghurs to China just weeks earlier. Well, CNA's Saksitsa Sombat with this report.
After several hearings and many delays, a verdict is now expected in the trial against the two main suspects accused of being behind the deadly bombing of a shrine in Thailand's capital more than a decade ago. On the evening of August 17, 2015, a pipe bomb exploded at the popular Erwan shrine located at one of the busiest intersections in Bangkok. The blast killed 20 people and injured more than 120 others, the majority of them foreign tourists from mainland China, Hong Kong and Malaysia. It was one of the worst attacks in Thailand's capital in recent history. The Thai government was seen as caught off guard a year after the military seized power in the coup. Therefore, the security apparatus was more focused on domestic threats rather than the ones from elsewhere. 2 weeks after the attack, police detained several suspects, with more having reportedly fled the country. Two men emerged as the prime suspects: Adem Karadak, also known as Bilal Mohammed, and Yusufu Miraili, both ethnic Uyghurs. At the time, police said the suspects were part of a human trafficking ring that carried out a revenge attack in response to the military government's crackdown. But some political and security observers said that the trigger was the Thai government's repatriation of Uyghurs to China in June 2015. Chinese authorities have been accused of mistreating the Muslim minority group. However, Beijing denies these allegations, as well as the theory of what prompted the Erwan shrine bombing. In November 2015, a military tribunal indicted the main suspects on several charges, including first-degree murder and illegal possession of explosives, but not terrorism. The two men had both pleaded not guilty and have accused Thai security officials of coercing them to confess. Since then, the trial has faced multiple delays due to the change from military to civilian courts, as well as a lack of qualified interpreters. Last year, the criminal court in Bangkok effectively more than half the number of witnesses initially listed at nearly 500. It also shortened the trial, all in an apparent effort to speed up proceedings. Both suspects are said to remain hopeful for an acquittal, but the case remains politically sensitive even after all this time, as it nears a conclusion 11 years after the attack. Saksitsa Sombat, CNA Bangkok.
Coming up next on East Asia tonight, China's producer prices rise for a third straight month in May to reach their highest in close to 4 years. Hello again, you're watching East Asia tonight, and we've got Roland Lim standing by with the very latest in business. Roland, I believe there's been a growing labor unrest in South Korea, specifically talking about Kakao staging a walkout today. How did that end?
Yeah, the Kakao internet conglomerate, which runs the biggest messaging app by users in Korea, was hit by a 4-hour strike, and there's more to come. Kakao's union says it'll hold a general strike on the 29th of June. The industrial action is expected to draw some 5,000 workers. Now, that's the entire union, making up more than 80% of the total headcount of the firm. Today, around 1,200 workers stage a partial walkout. The unionized workers are demanding job security and reforms and changes to a compensation system it says unfairly rewards management. The South Korean government helped mediate wage talks last month, but that broke down with Kakao rejecting the union's demands. The company said that profit-sharing proposals were unrealistic. Kakao has also said that compensation should align with its ability to invest and to compete with global AI firms. The dispute comes after workers at Samsung Electronics secured a landmark pay deal, which includes big bonuses for chip workers. Kakao stock dropped sharply, ending the day down in trade 3.4% for the day. China's factory gate inflation rose for a third straight month to touch its highest level in nearly 4 years, highlighting growing cost pressures across the world's second largest economy. Producer prices rose 3.9% on year in May, marking its strongest increase since 2022. The jump driven mainly by higher energy and commodity prices as conflict in the Middle East pushed up global oil prices. Consumer prices, however, are still sluggish by comparison. Now, China's consumer price index rose just 1.2% in May. That's slightly below market expectations. Food prices continue to fall, reflecting cautious household spending and soft domestic demand. The gap between rising factory gate prices and subdued consumer inflation suggests businesses are absorbing much of the higher costs rather than passing them on to shoppers. China is building its next generation of tech champions with new funding to boost domestic sectors and local companies. But new rules on how tech, data, and talent move across borders are also raising questions on what comes next. Beijing just announced last week it'll tighten rules on outbound investment firms from the 1st of July as the tech race heats up. Now, CNA's Deborah Wong has been digging into the ripple effects of that move and joins us now. Deborah, thanks for being on the show. So why is Beijing strengthening this now?
Well, the US-China trade war is spilling into tech, and China is tightening rules to protect what it considers strategic assets, with AI obviously one of them top on the list. And as you can see with what happened with Manners, for instance. Manners was headquartered in Singapore, but it was founded in China. And eventually, when it relocated to Singapore, it was acquired by the US headquartered Meta. But China eventually blocked that deal, and essentially limiting Washington's reach into Chinese intellectual property, Chinese AI. And even though that case happened before the new rules, what it does create are guardrails for how tech companies could eventually navigate. But it's important to note here that the regulations are not just happening in China, it's also happening globally. It's part of an international trend that we're seeing. The EU, for instance, most recently also approving laws to vet foreign investment, specifically in sensitive areas like AI and tech. And the US has barred its own firms from investing in Chinese high tech. And most recently, earlier this week, in fact, it expanded its list of Chinese and military companies, now encompassing a greater spectrum of tech companies. We're talking about Alibaba, Unitree, BYD. So it's not just sensitive technologies anymore. We're also looking at the robotics space, electric vehicle space, in fact. And it just boils down to the understanding that doing business in tech is not so straightforward because it's wide into the geopolitics. Now, I did a story on the Shenzhen startup culture to understand what sort of impact it has on the city. Have a listen.
It's also not another smart speaker. It's not a traditional AI assistant. Welcome, stop by our booth.
It's perhaps a lesser seen side of Shenzhen's tech ecosystem. Chinese startups pitching in English to investors in media from around the world.
我们是将灵感来源于瑞士高端的洁牙技术，把它做了重新的一个设计，让它不再。所以说，我们也希望能够带给北美、欧洲未来的话是全世界的一个人民一个更好的一个口腔护理的一个体验。
From dental devices to AI sports glasses and companion robots, at this showcase, the ideas vary, but the ambition is the same, to go global, although hurdles remain.
Finding money is the hardest part. I think there's many people, even more early stage than these companies, that didn't make it to this stage. So I would say the likelihood of getting investment is low. But here in Shenzhen, the possibility of getting it is higher than anywhere else, I would say, in the world right now. Because in Shenzhen, there's a special magic here that people are willing to think big.
That magic, say industry players, sets Shenzhen apart. A tech hub where government funding, venture capital, and manufacturing supply chains come together.
Shenzhen has the fastest innovation cycle. It really compresses the time from ideation, prototyping, testing, user feedback to mass production. They have the talent density, they have all the suppliers.
Founded in 2021, the non-profit InnoX Academy feeds that pipeline. Backed by the Shenzhen government, it trains and incubates China's next generation of innovators, with many showcasing at the event.
Our mandate was to incubate innovative talents and also incubate companies like DJI en masse. We curate our own curriculum from design thinking, how to define the problem, to system engineering, from an idea to technology solution to supply chain network. We have our own fund to invest in them as well. But in the fund, 80% are actually government LPs.
That's part of a broader public-private model, underpinning China's push for technological self-reliance. Local governments also back early-stage firms to drive innovation and for future returns.
推动金融资本向科技企业集聚，狠抓创新链、产业链、资金链、人才链深度融合，发挥国家创业投资引导基金。
But as state support grows, so does scrutiny. From July 1st, China is set to tighten oversight of outbound investments deemed relevant to national security. That extends to tech and data exports, as well as overseas staffing.
Overall, it reflects an increasingly confident China who thinks it has more rights, assets, and technology to safeguard overseas.
The new rules come as the global tech race heats up, and is seen as targeting frontier technologies like AI.
There are many entrepreneurs who have been taking a very conservative stance, even when these, rules were not formalized. There are many people that were very cautious about how they interacted with foreign capital holders and how they were going about expanding abroad. I think what gives most people the anxiety is really how it's going to be implemented.
Consumer tech firms like those at Shenzhen's InnoX Academy are largely outside the scope. But disputes involving Nexperia and Meta's reversed acquisition of Menace have become cautionary tales.
There will be a chilling effect as the compliance risk increases. Compliance burden for companies that goes beyond the borders will have to increase as well, and companies will have to allocate more resources in dealing with this.
For founders of global ambitions, that is now becoming part of the business plan.
我觉得新规的这样的一个落地的话，我觉得其实也是一个双刃剑。对，一方面的话可以让我们更加好的去筛选未来可以跟我们长期陪伴的这样的一个合作伙伴。另外一方面的话，确实我们得要好好的关注一下这样的一个条款了。那如果是约束太多、KPI 太多的话，可能会让我们束手束脚。就在前期的时候，创业者来说也更加多科普一下法律相关的这样的一些知识。
A challenge as China pushes its tech champions outward, at a time when the rules shaping that path are still being defined.
Got lots of cutting-edge stuff happening in Shenzhen, but is such scrutiny on outbound investments actually counterproductive to China's push for its companies to go global, do you think?
I think, if anything, it sets the parameters much clearer for companies to maneuver, to navigate. In fact, companies and analysts that I was speaking to say that it's not going to stop overseas deals because the writing's been on the wall for some time now. Frontier technology, for instance, companies dealing with semiconductor, advanced computing, advanced manufacturing, in fact, they right now have bigger compliance and legal teams. And even for consumer tech companies, for instance, you heard in a story, Esther Huang from Joy, she says that now the geopolitical situation, it's quite unstable. And so because she wants to go overseas, she now needs to expand her knowledge in legal affairs and compliance issues as well. And, it's really all part, if you think about it, all part of ensuring long-term business viability. But there might be some complications when we consider the standpoint, the viewpoint of overseas investors, perhaps given that parties now need to consider compliance risks, not just from one jurisdiction, but from multiple jurisdictions. I spoke to an expert to break this down. Have a listen.
The Chinese compliance risk pulls companies to the different direction which Western governments tends to pull them to, which will remind overseas investors who wants to form a partnership with Chinese partners that they are dealing with a more complicated scenario and geopolitical risk is even higher than before. The bottom line from Beijing is that they are not going to use it recklessly or use it as an active regulatory framework that feeds into all cases and all sectors.
Deborah, one final question before I let you go. Will this, do you think, have a wider impact on the way Chinese firms actually seek funding going forward?
Well, I think for firms, they must now consider a longer time frame. They need to factor in longer approval times as well as more transparency in their reporting processes. It's really all part of a broader shift where Beijing wants to ascertain, tighter control. And we look back at 2023. In fact, the Chinese securities regulator actually issued an announcement requiring all red chip companies, meaning to say Chinese companies registered offshore, to get Beijing's approval before listing on the Hong Kong Stock Exchange. And in fact, most recently in March this year, they announced that they required some of these companies to change their domicile back to China before going public. And as for companies with government funding, overseas scrutiny has always been there. So it's not going to shift that much. But when we look at the entire industry overall, these changes are going to be incremental. Companies now need to factor in longer time. The process is going to be more complex and, because it's increasingly shaped by geopolitics as well. But it's not going to deter them from seeking government funding because analysts have been telling me that that's really going to be giving them a massive capital boost. But beyond that, it's also going to be plugging them to the right networks in order for them to scale up. Have a listen.
For the foreseeable future, that's going to be a very major part of how Chinese companies, innovative startups get funded. And that's partly because there's just a dearth of private risk-taking capital in China, especially after foreign funds have largely pulled out. And two, it's just because that's kind of, it gives you credibility and gives you resources inside of China. Even when you get into things like physical AI and robotics, China is actually, very often the largest market, even for monetization. Therefore, you have to care a lot about the strategic resources you can corral for yourself inside of mainland China. And local government funds are one of them.
Deborah, thank you for that comprehensive report. That's CNA correspondent Deborah Wong in Shenzhen. And that'll do it for business. It's back to you, Telly.
Thanks so much for that, Roland. Well, coming up next on East Asia Tonight, Singapore police looking into dozens of scams involving BTS ticket sales. We're watching East Asia Tonight, and here are the headlines that we're following. Hong Kong holding 5 individuals and 2 companies accountable for the deadliest fire the city has seen in decades. These are the first criminal charges filed over the blaze that killed more than 160 people. Malaysian PM Anwar Ibrahim secures a long-term natural gas supply deal with Japan during a meeting in Tokyo with counterpart Sanae Takaichi. The leaders also agreeing a currency swap and deals in tech and defense. South Korea's President Myung is in Brussels to strengthen relations with the European Union. Security and economic cooperation top the agenda as he begins a 10-day tour of the region. Japan and Malaysia have agreed to boost energy and security cooperation at a meeting between their leaders today. Malaysian Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim held talks with his counterpart Sanae Takaichi as he wrapped up a 3-day working visit to Tokyo. CNA's senior correspondent Michio Ishida has more.
Japan and Malaysia signed 5 agreements to enhance cooperation on maritime security, energy security, decarbonization and sustainability, as well as healthcare. What Japan, a country with limited natural resources, sought from Malaysia the most was liquefied natural gas. Japan imports about 15% of its LNG from Malaysia, its second largest supplier after Australia, according to latest government data.
So we have just concluded the long-term LNG sales and purchase agreement between Petronas and JERA to supply 2 million tons per annum of LNG for a period of 20 years, beginning 2028. This is a remarkable feat and a success in terms of a trust and collaboration between the two great friendly countries.
重要鉱物のサプライチェーン強靭化につきましても、同志国や ADB、世界銀行などとも連携しながら、両国間で具体的な協力をさらに深めていくことを確認しました。こうした成果を踏まえて、エネルギー安全保障及びエネルギー移行の協力に関する文書や、重要鉱物の資源循環等の協力に関する文書が交わされたことを大変嬉しく思います。
Ms. Takaichi introduced the concept of Power Asia in April, aiming to deepen energy and resource resilience through partnerships in Asia. The two leaders also agreed to work together to strengthen their supply chain for critical minerals. Japan has been sending its patrol vessels and aircraft to Malaysia for the purpose of capacity building. Now, with the signing of a memorandum of cooperation between their coast guards, they will step up joint exercises, training and information sharing to ensure safe and free navigation, particularly in the Straits of Malacca and the South China Sea. In the area of finance, they agreed on a currency swap arrangement between the two countries, as both sides sought to deepen their comprehensive strategic partnership. Mr. Anwar also spoke earlier at the Nikkei Forum in Tokyo. He warned export restrictions and industrial policies are increasingly shaped by geopolitical rivalry, adding that issues like supply chains, critical minerals, and market access are being weaponized. Michio Ishida, CNA, Tokyo.
Chinese President Xi Jinping has reportedly thanked North Korean leader Kim Jong-un for what he described as fruitful summit talks in Pyongyang. State media KCNA reports that Mr. Xi sent a message of thanks to Mr. Kim, saying the two had reached an important consensus and that ties had entered a historical stage. Now, President Xi also said that he was willing to work with Mr. Kim to safeguard their ties, as well as regional and global peace. The Chinese president was in Pyongyang Monday and Tuesday, his first trip to North Korea in 7 years. Now, reports indicate that the leaders agreed to expand cooperation across politics, the economy, trade, and culture. They also pledged closer strategic communication. Neither side mentioned Pyongyang's nuclear program or security on the Korean peninsula. Taiwan has staged a second day of military drills, firing the U.S.-made HIMARS rocket system in a simulation of repelling an invasion. The exercise showcased the military's ability to rapidly reposition its HIMARS launchers after firing a tactic known as shoot and scoot. This comes as Taiwan modernizes its armed forces with more mobile weapon systems and adopts less predictable training methods.
今年是第一次以接到命令迅速机动到阵地，并在大甲溪南岸及北岸的阵地实施射击的这个训练。官兵也都秉持着平日教官的教导以及这个标准作业程序来完成并执行各种射击的训练科目。
Taiwanese troops fired rockets, artillery, mortars, and anti-tank missiles yesterday. The exercise simulated the destruction of an invading Chinese force along its west coast. Cross-strait tensions remain high as Beijing continues to claim sovereignty over Taiwan, which Taipei rejects. South Korea confirms a joint operation with Thailand to seize tons of drug-producing chemicals in several warehouses in Bangkok. Seoul's National Intelligence Service says it was the first time a South Korean government agency had participated in a raid of an overseas drug production base. The crackdown yielded close to 50 tons of ingredients that could have been used to produce more than 700 million doses of narcotics. Plans for the joint operation began in April when South Korea extradited a major player, Tapanan, at Bangkok's request. Now, Tapanan was identified as one of Asia's biggest drug traffickers and responsible for more than half of narcotics circulating in Thailand. Bangkok has issued dozens of arrest warrants against him in the last 10 years. Well, Cambodia says that it is carrying out its toughest crackdown yet on online scam centers, targeting hundreds of facilities across the country. In the first of a three-part series, CNA's Jack Board hears from stranded victims and examines how the nation became a global hub for cyber scams.
Abdul's family in Uganda sold their land so he could travel to Bangkok for what he believed was an English-speaking job. Instead, he was trafficked into Cambodia.
They told me, yeah, you're here to scam. We are scammers, this is a scamming company.
A month later, police raided the operation and Abdul escaped to Phnom Penh. Since then, he's been struggling to find a way home.
Every single day is a nightmare. You're sleeping outside, you're not safe, you are in the country illegally, you have no visa, you have no food, you have nowhere to run to. This experience has been the worst in my entire life.
This is one of the busiest areas in Phnom Penh in the evening. It's a place where regular people come to jog and to exercise, and as they pass by, they pass others who are in despair. Indonesians here tonight, dozens of them, most of them victims of scamming networks, left destitute, left homeless, some of them who have been tortured, all of them hoping to get home.
Karena kita nggak mencapai omset, nggak dapat target, jadi dia kesel, tuh kena siksa kita, kena strum, tekanannya pun tiap hari, mana member, mana omset, nggak ada masuk uang ini, katanya. Kayak mana mau menggaji kalian kalau kalian santai-santai, nggak dapat member, nggak dapat target.
The Cambodian government estimates about 300,000 foreigners have left the country since the crackdown intensified. But many more remain stuck in limbo, unable to afford flights and lacking documentation.
Some were fleeing into the jungle, some were hiding in different towns. A lot have ended up sleeping on the streets of Phnom Penh. You have several thousand people from just across the African continent. You have people from Indonesia, from the Philippines, from Vietnam, from China. Everywhere in the world is now involved in scams, so they're all coming to Cambodia, and there's an enormous amount of human trafficking.
So how did Cambodia become a hub for scam activities? Experts say the country offered many of the conditions criminal groups sought: casino zones, weak oversight, border economies, and long-established smuggling routes. During the COVID-19 pandemic, online gambling and digital fraud flourished as casino tourism took a hit. An expert says the industry quickly evolved into one of the country's most powerful illicit economies.
And it's only in the last 5 years that Chinese transnational organized criminal groups have transformed mainland Southeast Asia into the global apex for online scams. Southeast Asia is now really the only space in the world where you have massive industrial scale compounds in the hundreds, where you can see mass numbers of individuals being trafficked into circumstances of forced criminality and modern slavery and types.
Such compounds can be found across Cambodia. Srei Tum, for instance, used to be a sleepy riverside town. Today, it's dominated by casinos and other huge complexes, many of them now shut down because they hosted scam operations. Yet, construction continues. This facility, locally known as Prince 3, is allegedly linked by researchers and international authorities to a group accused of operating cyber scams, forced labour schemes and cryptocurrency fraud. Security remains tight, and there are watchful eyes on the road.
the more remote the place where you set up a kind of compound zone, the harder it is for people to escape, the harder it is to monitor. Mondulkiri has been a very, like, tragically a case of that. And the people who were trapped up there in the mountains talk about the absolute terror they had because they were told they'd be eaten by wild animals if they escaped.
Cambodian authorities say enough is enough. They've launched an aggressive campaign against scam compounds and invited international media to witness the effort. In the next part of this series, I visit facilities emptied by government raids and examine whether Cambodia's crackdown can truly dismantle the networks behind the scams. Jack Board, CNA, Phnom Penh.
Well, here in Singapore, there have been at least 62 cases reported of scams involving the sale of tickets to BTS's Arirang concert since the start of this month. And total losses have amounted to at least 68,000 Singapore dollars. And the police say most victims were targeted on platforms like X and Carousel. They were asked to make payment via PayNow. Scammers would then ask for more money under the guise of admin fees or other charges. Now, victims would only realize they've been scammed when they did not receive the tickets. The police remind people to remain vigilant against such scams and only purchase tickets from authorized platforms such as Ticketmaster. Coming up on East Asia tonight, the first charges for Hong Kong's deadly Tai Po fire have been filed. Our correspondent joins us live from the West Kowloon court to break down what happened at today's hearing. Recapping our top story, 7 people and 2 companies have been charged over Hong Kong's deadliest fire in decades, which killed 168 residents last November. Well, it is the first time charges have been filed for the Tai Po blaze. And for the very latest, we have CNA correspondent Geraldine Yap joining us live from Hong Kong. Jerry, so we understand that a media briefing was held earlier this hour. What came out of that?
So we heard from the police and anti-graft agency, which outlined the charges that the 7 individuals and the 2 companies face in relation to the fire. So of these, the 2 companies, the main contractor of the project Prestige Construction, the consultancy firm for the project Willpower Architects, 2 directors for the companies as well as a registered inspector have been charged with manslaughter of all 168 people who died in the fire. And for the first time, all 168 victims were identified by name in court. Now, the police investigation uncovered lapses in the renovation process. So this includes the use of substandard renovation materials like flammable mesh and styrofoam boards, which led to the fire spreading very, very quickly through the buildings. Now, the 4 other individuals have also been charged with other offences, and this includes money laundering. The anti-graft agency said that they uncovered instances of bid rigging by the contractor and the consultancy firm in the selection of the contractor for the renovation project. They also uncovered instances of fraud and corruption.
總括嚟講，今次嘅不幸事件，我哋懷疑係有人為咗自己嘅一己私利，佢哋不但係冇履行到佢哋嘅專業責任，甚至係用一啲懷疑貪污、造假等嘅不法行為去達到佢哋嘅目的，罔顧居民嘅性命財產安全。我喺度強調，廉署同警方 會繼續鍥而不捨調查呢個案件，唔排除會有更多嘅拘捕行動或者檢控。
So, Jerry, after today's hearing, what does the legal process look like from here?
Now, we understand that the first hearing has been set for 2nd September, and the 3 men who have been charged with manslaughter, they have been denied bail and taken into custody today. But it's unclear if any of these defendants will be present at the first hearing in September. But what we do know is that this is the first time that the charges have been laid out in relation to the fire, and these charges come even as the public inquiry into the fire is continuing, it's ongoing. And this public inquiry is separate from the criminal investigation that is also continuing. The public inquiry is meant to look into the causes of the fire and to guide the government review and prevent similar incidents from happening in the future. So far, we have heard from that public inquiry allegations of bid rigging and use of substandard construction materials, which of course were key to the charges laid out today. But we have also heard from the witnesses, which include residents and government officials, allegations and claims of government oversight of the project. Now, as for the fate of the residents of Wang Fuk Court, they were allowed to go back to their homes last month to collect their belongings and also to take a last look at their homes. They have been given until August to decide if they want to accept the government's offer to buy back their damaged flats.
All right, many thanks for that update. CNA correspondent Geraldine Yap reporting to us live from Hong Kong. And we've got more coverage on the Tai Po fire that can be found on our website, cna.asia, and via our mobile app. Our YouTube channel also has this episode of CNA Correspondent, which examines how safety lapses turned homes into death traps. Now, Japan's meteorological agency says that El Nino has formed across the equatorial Pacific with a 100% chance it will last until October. Now, the phenomenon started last month. And El Nino, as you know, is a warming of the Pacific Ocean that alters global weather patterns. The current event is the first since 2023, and it is forecast to be one of the strongest on record. Experts are concerned that this year's El Nino may grow into a super event, causing record droughts, floods, and other temperature-related disasters. Now, record heat has been reported globally before El Nino developed from a delayed start to the Indian monsoon to a temporary halt to Peru's fishing season. Well, meantime, the world has experienced its second hottest May on record. According to the European Union's climate monitor, the continent is baking under an unusually early heat wave as climate extremes become the new normal. Records were broken in Britain, France, Ireland, and Portugal due to a heat dome. Well, that's when a large area of high pressure gets stuck, trapping warm air underneath. The EU climate monitor says that the extreme heat likely worsened conditions for people, crops, and ecosystems, giving them little time to adapt. Now, the average sea surface temperature was also the second highest on record, as conditions shift towards the warming El Nino weather pattern. Well, it appears that a record number of Asian football teams will feature at this year's FIFA World Cup. In Singapore, fans from across the region are preparing to support their home countries as communities gather behind their national colours. CNA's Paulson with this report.
For Chang Ju-yun, the World Cup is more than a football tournament. The South Korean football coach has spent years developing young players in Singapore. But when his national team takes the field, his attention turns home.
Of course, we are Korean, born and raised in Korea, and then we are really proud of our country. We really love the football, passionate about the football, and then especially 2002, we have the good memory. 2002 as we achievements the semi-finals.
This year, there is even more reason for fans to pay attention. A record 9 Asian nations have qualified for the World Cup, the largest contingent the region has ever sent to a single tournament. For supporters in Singapore, it means more communities have a team to rally behind and more opportunities to share the World Cup experience.
I think it's a great thing, and the more Asian representative teams in the World Cup is a great thing. I think it shows how far Asian football's come. If you look at some of the teams like Korea and Japan and Australia as well, much more competitive on the global stage, and we're seeing these teams upset more of the bigger teams, especially the European teams, over the last few tournaments.
Asian football has grown in confidence. South Korea reached the semi-finals in 2002. Australia had become regular contenders on the world stage. Saudi Arabia's victory over Argentina in 2022 showed Asian teams can challenge the best. Expectations across the region are now higher than ever.
A record Asian contingent means more than just stronger representation at the World Cup. For many fans living in Singapore, it means more home nations to support and more communities with a stake in the tournament.
Australian business owner Brendan Collins has watched several World Cups from Singapore. He says the experience is unlike back home.
It's a much more multicultural experience for sure. So you've got people from all different nationalities centralised in Singapore. So that's a big difference versus Australia. I'd say it's a little less loud, which is actually quite nice for football, but it's certainly a nice experience.
The excitement is not limited to Asian supporters. Morocco's historic run to the semi-finals at the 2022 World Cup in Qatar captured global attention. The North African side became the first African nation to reach the last four. Many Singapore-based supporters rallied behind the team. Its success showed how football can unite people beyond national borders. Chef Anis Rif El Mustafa says Morocco's run brought together supporters from far beyond the Moroccan community.
It's true. It's a moment that cannot be forgotten. Having so many people from different cultures, nationalities, background, and interest coming together to cheer for Morocco, it's unbelievable how many friends I have made through that match, through that tournament.
A football coach, a business owner, a chef, different professions, different backgrounds. This year, more communities than ever have a team to support and more reasons to come together around football's biggest tournament.
Only one nation will lift the trophy, but for supporters like Chung, Brandon and Anis Rif, the tournament offers something beyond football. A connection to home, a chance to share their culture, and another reason to come together in Singapore. Paul Sung, CNA, Singapore.
Well, for viewers in Singapore, you can catch every moment of the FIFA World Cup 2026 on MeWatch, all 104 matches live. And on that note, I hope you've enjoyed Wednesday's edition of East Asia Tonight. Don't forget your headlines anytime at cna.asia. And you can also look us up on all our socials, including Facebook and YouTube. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you again tomorrow.